David,
All right.
I got that locked.
That'd be a good idea. I got that chair all warmed up. It's like
Perfect.
it needs it today, you know.
All right. I need to wear that?
No, you can just
leave it
put it
like
on
that?
the table. It picks up pretty good.
All right. I'll pull my notes up here. All right. All right. Well, I'm Dustin Remick. I've seen most of you guys here before, whether it's at church or at the men's group. So, Dave asked me to speak during this meeting. I guess to kind of give a little bit of background of myself and experiences, and I guess more or less kind of what led me here. So, I didn't have a lot of experience with the church growing up. Wasn't really a part of my upbringing. I was born, my mom's parents are Catholic, and I was baptized at a Catholic church at like 2 months old. I don't really remember any of that. But we moved around a lot. Just for context, by the time I was 30 years old, I had moved 23 times. So I didn't really have a stable upbringing as far as, where we lived. Didn't really make a lot of friends. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, so we were kind of each other's friends with as many times as we had to move. When I was about 12, we were living in Massachusetts, and my parents got divorced at that point. So my mom had a couple of sisters and then her parents as well that lived in central Pennsylvania. So we split, we moved there. And then once we moved back to be near her family, her mom was still going to church, and a couple of her sisters that were local they were going to a Catholic church. So I was kind of thrown into it at about 12 years old. We'd go to church, we went to Sunday school, and so that was kind of my first experience, with going to church. And it was a unique experience, not to say anything bad about Catholicism, but it was a lot different than what I've experienced here. The main thing was that when I went to Sunday school, there was a couple that ran the class, and they were newlyweds. They were probably like in their mid-20s. They were super nice people, but the overall kind of attitude was like, here, this is the stuff that we want you to learn, and I almost got the impression that like they didn't like the fact that I would ask questions because I was new and I didn't understand a lot of this stuff. So I was the kid that was always raising my hand like, what about this? What about that? And it looked to me at that point like it was making them kind of uncomfortable that I was asking all these questions. All the other kids are just like, going right along with it. And, for me, it was just like, well, I'm not just going to start believing. I've had no, experience with any of this stuff. Some of it was foreign to me, was new, didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So I really kind of felt like they were kind of like, yeah, this is the new kid, and, he's going to ask a lot of questions. And, so I didn't really buy into it, I guess. I just kind of went because my mom wanted to go. She was going with her family, and that was a way for her to kind of find some, community, and it was helping her out, especially considering, the divorce and everything that she had to go through. So, I went along with it, and I went for about 4 years, up until I was about 16 years old. I did my first communion, all that kind of stuff. But, a lot of that, her mom, was like, oh, well, if you go and do this, we'll buy you some toys. So I was doing it for all the wrong reasons. They were basically bribing me to go along with a lot of this stuff. So I was like, sure, whatever, you want to buy me things, I'll do it. But by the time I got to about 16, I was old enough to where I kind of was able to make the decision, told my mom I don't really want to go anymore. I wasn't really getting anything out of it. And she was like, well, you're old enough, if that's the decision that you want to make. And that was really kind of it. That was like the end of my church-going days. And I really didn't have a problem with it, but because of the way I kind of got thrown into it there, it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And I don't want to say that I was, like mean towards like other Christians or anybody. It was just like I just didn't want anything to do with it. I look back, and when I was younger, people would ask me, and I was like, I'm atheist. I think really I was just agnostic. Like I really do kind of looking back believe that there was something. I just didn't know what it was, and because of my upbringing and the way that the whole church thing had gone when I went to the Catholic Church. Like, I just didn't even want to like name what it was. I didn't want to say it was God. I didn't really have any interest in, really looking into it. I was just really kind of turned off by the whole concept. So I was like, I'm just going to ignore it, and I did, and I excelled with, science. I was always real big into logical, explanations and trying to understand things, through math and this, that, and the other thing. And I think part of it was I was just kind of, I don't know if I was afraid, but it made me uncomfortable. And so that was where I found my comfort. That was where I got my answers. That was just kind of how I rationalized the world in which we lived. So, I went from 16 all the way up until I was about 40 something before I really started looking back into it. I met my wife about 14 years ago, and, we got married. We had a couple of kids, and then this is 2026. So in 2018, yeah. So about six and a half years ago, we were pregnant with what would have been our first son. And we got about to the 6-month point in her pregnancy, and we lost him overnight unexpectedly. And that whole experience was crazy. Obviously, it was very upsetting, especially for her. But the way that everything happened was not like I would have expected. It started with, we didn't hear the heartbeat. We went into the hospital immediately. And, they confirmed doing the ultrasound that there was no heartbeat. And so this was the day before my birthday. And they asked us what we wanted to do. And she didn't want to be in the hospital during my birthday. She still wanted to, make sure that we were able to celebrate, my day, irregardless of what was going on. We went back home. Obviously it was pretty somber, but we still had her parents come over. We hung out and we did our birthday thing. And then that night, about 9 p.m., she really wasn't feeling good. And she's like, I think we need to go to the hospital. So we went in at that point, and my birthday was a Saturday, which was March 31st. The next day, that Sunday, was actually Easter. We were there through Easter, and then he was actually born the following morning, like at, I don't know, somewhere between like 2 and 6 a.m. We're not exactly sure what happened. She, being as distraught as she was, she basically told the nursing staff, they're like, I don't want to feel anything. I just want to, be as numb as I can, get this over with. And we had such a great nursing staff. The doctor there that she had too was amazing. They were checking on her every so many hours. And then at about, I think they came in like around midnight, and they said, we'll be in in a few hours to check again. They had given her the medicine to try to, because she said that she still wanted to deliver him naturally. He was far enough along. They're like, that's fine. So we were waiting for the induction medicine to take effect. I was sleeping next to her while she was in the bed. Next thing I know, we woke up at around 5:30 in the morning. The doctor had come in, and they were to check on her, and they lifted up the sheet, and they were like, oh, he's here. And she's like, really? She's like, I was asleep. Like, I didn't even feel anything. And not only had he been born without her knowing, without her having any kind of pain, but he was on call, which is still in the sac, which is very rare that happens. Her water didn't break. He was still in there, so they had to open that up. And at that point, they found that his umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck about 3.5 times. But to this day, even talking to her doctor, they're like, that really shouldn't have mattered. He doesn't breathe through the umbilical cord. He gets blood and stuff through there, but that he wouldn't have choked from it. So we still have no explanation as to why he passed. Modern medicine, they're like, there's no indication of what happened. She said that at that moment when he was born, that she felt like this fatherly presence in the room with her, and there was like this overwhelming sense of like calm and peace. And we got to spend some time with him, and so it was a very unique experience. And considering how horrible it was, we both kind of had this weird comfort about the whole thing, and both of us kind of agreed that we felt like just because he was there and that he was gone, that he wasn't really gone. And in a way, it was almost like he came specifically to kind of open a window, I guess, if you will, to let us know, hey, there's something more out there. You guys need to like look into this. So it was almost like he was there like as a signal flare to be like, look, you guys have been living your life a certain way. You know, there's things that you need to understand about life. There's more out there, you know. And so unbeknownst to us, we both over the next 6 months kind of started going down our own, you know, spiritual journey to kind of get those answers that we weren't really getting from anywhere else. And to an extent, we didn't really care to look for at the time, but we felt like this urgent need to like, look, we need more. Like the way that we're living life, it's just kind of, we're just kind of surviving. We're just kind of here, but there's got to be more to it. So she was doing her own thing, and I was looking into my own thing, and I was all over the place. I was looking into like ancient Egyptian stuff. I was looking into aliens. I was looking into all this other metaphysical stuff. I was looking into Buddhism. I was looking everywhere I could to try to find some explanation, to find something that made sense. And eventually I kind of ended up circling back around to Christianity, and I started looking into more detail about, you know, the life of Jesus and everything. And, you know, the interesting thing was when I was looking into all these different spiritual, you know, ways of you know, explaining life and why we're here and what we are, you know, even though the stories were very dramatic and where they started and whatnot, the core principles were basically like just be nice to each other, and, you know, the belief that there is something higher than us that we come from. And so when I got back around to Christianity and I was really looking more into like, you know, who Jesus was, even though I had already kind of had a little bit of a background, you know, I didn't really pay much attention to it. I was like, you know, this, I think, you know, who he was, what he represented, why he came here made a lot of sense to me. And whereas a lot of other things, you know, kind of went off on mythological paths, and there wasn't that concrete thing. It was like a person, you know, who may have had an experience, but they were just kind of like a messenger. But, you know, Jesus seemed to kind of embody what we were supposed to be, and, you know, the whole following Jesus and what he represents. I really kind of felt like, okay, maybe this is what it is. We still didn't really do anything about it at that point, because that was about 5-6 years ago, but we at least started to kind of come to this conclusion together. Although we were doing our own thing, we kind of met back in the middle, started talking about it. And then about 2 years ago, she just had this pull. She's like, I think I need to go back to church. And actually what happened was she had invited one of her school friends that she still talks to go to church, and she was going to come back here. She came here when she was a teenager, so she had already known the church. She was here when Pastor Randy Chiz was here and some of the other people, and she always loved it here. She felt welcome here. And so she's like, I think I want to go back to that church, because, you know, that's where I kind of had those experiences and I had a really good time, and I'd like to see if I still have that experience. So her friend ended up kind of backing out at the last minute and just got cold feet and was like, I don't really know if I'm ready to go back yet myself. So she asked me, she said, you know, would you go, you know, even if it's just like once or twice, so I can kind of get my bearings, and if I feel comfortable, then you don't have to go anymore. So I said, yeah, that's fine. I'll go with you. And so I came with her, and from the very first moment that we walked in, we were made to feel like family. Everybody here was really pleasant. It was very welcoming. It just felt like a nice, comfortable atmosphere. And we left, and she's like, you know, I don't know how you feel about it. She's like, but I'm fine if, you know, you don't really want to come again. And I said, no, actually, I kind of liked it. I think I'll come back. And she was like, really? She's like, I didn't expect that. And I said, well, I mean, it wasn't what I was expecting at all. You know, everything was much more modern, and the music was more uplifting, and I didn't feel like, from the moment I walked in, like I was in trouble like I did when I went to Catholic church, you know. And she's like, no, it's nothing like that. And I said, well, that's all I ever knew, so I had no idea church could be like this. And I said, no, I think I'll come again. I want to see, you know, a little bit more about it, you know. And I was watching the band and everything, and I actually went to school for music production, and I saw them running the soundboard up here. And so after we came here a few weeks, I was like, you know, I think I want to talk to somebody and see if I can help out with that. So I talked to Luke, and he's like, yeah, if you want to jump up there, we'll show you how to do it. And you know, so I've been involved now. I think she wants to start helping out with doing the video cameras and stuff like that. And we met some great people. We have some really good friends here now, and, you know, we haven't once, you know, regretted coming here. Every day that we come here, it's always a good day. It's always a good message. You know, we love the pastors and the other staff here from the life group and the kids and stuff like that. So it's been a really humbling experience, and I think it's really kind of helped us to reach out a little bit and let down our walls, and we're looking forward to what's left to come in the future.
Amen, buddy.
Amen.
So thank you to you guys, because I mean,